I feel like I owe the company money already, starting the show with a full song, because I don't always start with a full song. But how do you cut off any of the lyrics from the impromptu performance of one Mr. Jim Cuddy of Blue Rodeo fame? We used to be the best of friends, and thanks to those of you who shared it with me over the weekend, I thought it is fitting again to play it on the show. Well, not that song again. That one just released by Jim Cuddy of Blue Rodeo fame. But we had similar tunes as part of our programming last week, because it feels as though perhaps we're not the best of friends with our neighbors to the south these days, doesn't it? Good Monday morning, 7 minutes after 9 on this Monday, March the 10th, after a short weekend. Maybe I don't owe the company anything after all, even though I let a song play for a full 2 minutes and a bit to start the show. After all, I had a short weekend, just like you did. One less hour in the weekend as we sprung forward. And more on this idea of springing coming up in a few moments on your Farwell Show 5. But I can't help but notice it is bright, it is sunny, it is mild. Our spirits seem to be lifted. And I wonder, is it the weather lifting those spirits, or is it the return of sunny ways? I mean, a little bland for my liking, to be honest with you, but maybe after almost 10 years of anything but bland, and one might argue dramatic, and somebody that came with a whole heck of a lot of sizzle, and we're still not sure on the amount of substance, but nonetheless, maybe moving from that to a little bit more bland is exactly what we, as a country, certainly what the federal Liberal Party needed. But we're going to get into that in and around 9:15 this morning. Right now, let's get to that Farwell Show 5 for this Monday morning. Number one, Canada has a new leader of its Liberal Party and a Prime Minister designate.
From our mines to our ports, from our logging roads to our city streets, we're strongest when we're united, when we're one economy, not 13, when we can cheer for different teams and still be on one team when it counts.
Mark Carney won the Liberal leadership yesterday in a first ballot landslide, capturing 86% of the vote. Number two, mixed messages as we enter the second week of a strike by outdoor workers in the region. The region said talks were set to resume on the weekend, but the union gave no indication they were at the table. More than 250 workers went on strike last Monday, affecting local landfills, roads and water, as well as the airport. The union says it's looking for higher wages to keep up with the rising cost of living. Number three on your Farwell Show 5 this morning, as sunshine and warm temperatures greet us to start the week, we still can't forget that brutal February full of snow and cold, but that winter blast might have made us forget what happened on February the 2nd.
Willie did not see his shadow. We will have an early spring.
Yeah! An early spring, you say, in Wyerton? Yeah, Wyerton Willie predicted an early spring, and this week's weather will certainly feel like spring, but the official start of spring is still 10 days away, so it may be later than many of us want, but it's still technically early for spring. That kind of reminds me of 2019, when we launched Ion Light Rail service in this region. We were promised it would launch in the spring of 2019, and the first train rolled just minutes before summer arrived that June of 2019. Number four on your Farwell Show 5 this morning, Canada's tariff battle with the U.S. has changed the conversation around our economy. The trade dispute is expected to weigh on the Bank of Canada when its interest rate decision is made this week. One economist says without tariffs, it would have been a good time to press pause on rates. But now the central bank may need to lower its key policy rate to help cushion the blow. Financial markets widely expect the Bank of Canada to cut rates by a quarter point to 2.75% on Wednesday when that rate announcement is made. And number 5 on your Farwell Show 5 this morning, back-to-back wins for the Kitchener Rangers this weekend, who now have 44 wins on the season, tied for 7th most all-time in a single season in team franchise history. The Rangers have 5 games to play, including this Friday night at home to North Bay. And that is your Farwell Show 5 for this Monday morning, the 10th of March. I'm thinking to myself, I get it. Mark Carney is the new leader of the federal Liberal Party, and he is now, for at least a minute, the Prime Minister of this country, having never held elected office. So I can certainly understand the concern with that and wondering, shouldn't we as a country cast ballots to determine who our Prime Minister is? But if I'm a member of the opposition, do I really want to go to an election right now? Do I really want to make sure that Mark Carney is Prime Minister for only a minute and not longer? I'm not positive I would be so hasty to force that election, but maybe you feel differently. Let's talk about it on the Mike Farwell Show. This is 570 News Radio and Rogers TV. Well, it wasn't even close, was it? The vote to elect the new Liberal leader, it was one ballot, and it was 86% for Mark Carney, the former governor of the Bank of Canada, the Bank of England. I think there's a lot to unpack, if you'll forgive the turn of phrase, when it comes to the really rather dismal showing of both Karina Gould and Chrystia Freeland. I guess they're still carrying the baggage of the Justin Trudeau regime here in Canada and as the leader of the federal Liberal Party. And I understand the concern expressed that what we have now is essentially a private citizen who's never held public office becoming our prime minister, if even just for a moment. But goodness, given the groundswell of support for Mark Carney and the tone that he has set in his opening address, I don't know how quick I would be. And you can take the polls for what they are, just little snapshots of how people are feeling politically. But I don't know how quick I would be to trigger an election. And frankly, if one is going to occur, it would need the support of the federal NDP. And so if the Liberals get propped up into the fall, whose fault would that be? Right? Would this be the Liberals trying to pull a fast one, or would it be the NDP propping up a government until October of this year? I'm just not certain how interested I would be, given where the polls are at and given how the Liberal Party has now positioned itself, pulling back on the carbon tax, pulling back on the capital gains tax, etc. And Mark Carney had some pretty strong words about Pierre Poilievre yesterday.
Pierre Poilievre's plan will leave us divided and ready to be conquered. Because a person who worships at the altar of Donald Trump will kneel before him, not stand up to him. Pierre Poilievre's slogans are not solutions. His anger is in action. His division is in strength. Division won't win a trade war. Division won't pay the rent or the mortgage. Division won't bring down the price of groceries. Division won't make Canada strong.
Kneels at the altar or worships at the altar of Donald Trump. Strong language from the new leader of the federal Liberal Party. Let's go to the phones, hear from you on this. Paul, good morning.
Morning. Do you like facts?
I do.
Do you like quotes that can be backed up?
Sure.
Okay, last night the National Party president of the Liberal Party announced the coronation of Carney, of course, and then he introduced Carney's daughter, who is going to introduce her father. And during the introduction, Carney's daughter admitted, or clearly stated, that Mark Carney rips off music. And now I don't know how they got her to say this, but she says that he burned the music to a CD and gave it to his families as presents.
Isn't that, I don't know, doesn't everybody do that?
Yeah, at 16 years old, I'm not even sure if she knows. I guess she's walking around with her Sony Walkman, listening to the CD that her father ripped off, pirated music, and giving it away as presents. That's the kind of morals this guy has. He'll rip off anything, including Canadians. And by the way, another fact, and even CBC admitted this, the rally for Pierre Poilievre in London had a larger crowd than the Liberal leadership campaign. Those are facts.
All right. Appreciate the call and the facts this morning. I would suspect that the rally for Pierre Poilievre cuts a slightly wider swath than just Liberals in the room for Mark Carney, right? I suppose, anyway, those who were part of the party membership, etc. I mean, Joe and Jane Public, without a party membership, can attend a rally for Pierre Poilievre. And I guess if comparing crowd sizes is what we want to do, I'll stand by what Paul says, given the size of the crowd. Although that's also didn't Donald Trump get into the whole size of the crowd thing? And it was the largest crowd ever for this and the largest crowd ever for that. That notwithstanding, I'll just say again that I'm not certain, given the momentum around the Liberal Party right now, the tone set by Mark Carney yesterday, and I'm strictly looking at this as objectively as I can, but I'm not convinced that a party, and I'm talking to the Conservative Party now of Canada, that had such a wide lead in the polls months ago, a lead that has narrowed to almost being a dead heat. If I'm that party, I'm not sure I want to go to an election against the Liberals right now. This all might have worked out. I'm not sure it could have worked out better for the Liberals, quite frankly. But that's just from where I'm sitting. Paul sees it differently because the crowd for Pierre Poilievre's rally in London last evening was larger than that crowd that greeted Mark Carney as the new Liberal leader. And the new Liberal leader burns CDs for his kids as presents. This is the Mike Farwell Show on 570 News Radio and Rogers TV. Bob, good morning.
Mike.
Hi, Bob.
I almost fell off my chair.
How so?
You agreed with me, kind of.
On what?
Remember about a week ago you had... you were doing the show Mondays at 11:30. I forget, what's the guy's name? David
Drewe.
Yeah. And I phoned in and asked you guys if you thought if the numbers kept dropping, if you thought Pierre should push for an election, and then you said yeah. And I said I'm not too sure. So now you're saying you're not too sure you should.
All right. Well, there you go. I guess we did agree. You know what? "Use guys" is one of my favorite phrases of all time. Maybe, Bob, because it's Monday and David Drewe will be here at 11:30 for Drewe's Views. You'll want to call in again and see what we guys think about Pierre Poilievre pushing for an election. I'm sure David Drewe will have thoughts on the Liberal leadership convention this weekend and Mark Carney's landslide win on the first ballot with 86% of the votes. Just ahead of your 9:30 update in the 570 News Center. City of Waterloo. This is really interesting stuff. Has been granted by Ontario's Superior Court an injunction order for St. Paddy's Day weekend. And so St. Paddy's Day falls a week today, Monday. The weekend leading into that, the Saturday and the Sunday, may well be the time that folks in the region, primarily students, decide to party for St. Paddy's Day. We know how this has gone for decades in our community. The University District gets overrun by quote-unquote partiers who just take to the streets and engage in lawless behavior. And we have tried and tried to clamp down on this over the decades, and this injunction will allow people or police to arrest partiers, not just issue a ticket to and a subsequent fine, but detain, arrest, and otherwise remove people who are committing the criminal offense of disobeying an order of court. So it won't just be a nuisance bylaw charge. It will be an arrest and detention by police of anyone partying in the streets of Waterloo beginning this weekend, thanks to the order issued, the injunction issued by the Ontario Superior Court. We're going to need a lot of holding cells capacity, I think, on the weekend. But an interesting move by Waterloo, and we'll learn more about it in the update and keep you apprised as the day goes on. This is the Mike Farwell Show on 570 News Radio and Rogers TV. We all know that efforts are being made to combat climate change, and climate change is something that affects the entire planet. There's a reason, I believe sincerely, that we changed the language from global warming to climate change, because I think when we talked about global warming, it made it difficult for people to connect the battle against it to their own community. And so we speak of climate change, and we know that there are local initiatives aimed at combating that very issue, climate change. But how much do those local initiatives cost us, and who is minding the municipal purse strings? Kicking International Council out of Local Environmental Initiatives, or KICLEI, KICLEI, is wondering that very thing. Who's minding the purse strings, and how much is this costing us? Peter McFadden is a member of KICLEI Canada and joins the program this morning. Peter, good morning.
Good morning. Good to be with you, Mike.
It's good to have you here, and I appreciate the time. I followed with interest your delegation at Regional Council a month or so ago, and I'm wondering what your primary concern is, Peter, or perhaps the primary concern of KICLEI Canada.
Well, I mean, it starts, the core of the delegation was aimed at trying to share with Council some thoughts about how to reduce the deficit and the tax load on voters. But in the bottom line is that we're facing a situation where our governments generally, from top to bottom, have been captured over the years by the UN, the World Economic Forum, and NGOs, which means that the ability of our councils to be able to sort of put full attention to local issues is diverted into a number of these one world order initiatives. And so what KICLEI is about is trying to say, how do we get localism back as opposed to globalism that we have now? So that's, I think, a quick answer to that.
Yeah, and I think that gives us a good high-level view of what it's all about. So are we suggesting then, Peter, through this initiative, that municipal councils, municipalities generally, should not make any investments around climate change initiatives?
Oh, I wouldn't say that, no. I mean, and I very much appreciated your look at seeing how climate has gone from being classified as a disaster or a crisis now to the fact that they refer to climate change. And the reality is that climate change has been with us forever, and it will be with us forever. And, you know, the sort of people's contribution to climate change is extremely, extremely limited. So the basis of climate change being something that we should upend our world for, there's just really not a validity to that argument. And there are scientists all around the globe that have come out and verified the fact that climate change is something that we just live with. And it's not at a crisis stage. It's not at that kind of situation whatsoever. So it's trying to share with people that we need to be reasonable and that we need to understand that a lot of the measures coming in are simply measures to take away the rights and freedoms of our citizens, the right to own a car, the right to move freely, and all these sorts of things are part of that package.
Okay, well, sorry, just for a moment there. I drove my car to work today. I don't feel as though anybody is taking away my right to own that car.
No, and that is something that's in the process. That this is all part of, you've probably heard about the 15-minute city plans and projections for bringing people into confined areas and then being able to very closely track what they do and to discourage the use of automobiles, individual automobiles, that is.
Right, but the whole idea behind the 15-minute city is so that what you need can be obtained within a 15-minute walk of your home. But it doesn't mean you can only go to those places. If there's a place on the other side of town that I really like, I can still go there.
Maybe. Yeah, maybe. I mean, once again, if we look at and dig deep into what's been driving the whole 15-minute city plan, because from a planning concept, just as you stated, it makes some sense. We actually have had for decades, the planning people in our various governments have been trying to promote urbanization as opposed to rural living. So in other words, they're trying to bring people into the centers. That's been going on for decades.
It has, but I would say that what's going on right now with the Wilmot Land Assembly flies directly in the face of that. Should we create an industrial mega site in Wilmot Township, we sure as heck aren't going to be walking to work.
Yeah, well, that's true, and it is a bit of a dichotomy, isn't it? When we look at it, and when we understand the strategic value of that property as it relates to our water supply and everything else, then one certainly has to question and say, does this make sense to take 770 acres of Class A agricultural land out of circulation for the sake of a plant? We know that we have other areas in the city where it could be, or within the region where that kind of space or activity can be accommodated. So why this particular prime farmland? I mean, there's a big push against it, and I think it makes some sense. And I think what's been very frustrating for people is the methodology used to try and achieve that goal of assembling the land. That methodology is not something that most people can relate to as being something you do to your tax-paying citizens.
Do you think, Peter, that municipal governments or municipalities generally should make any effort to reduce their carbon footprint?
Well, if we start with looking at CO2, the level of CO2 is at a very low level. CO2 is something that we must have to live. CO2 is something that people that own greenhouses, for instance, literally pump into their greenhouses to help their plants grow.
But should municipalities reduce their carbon footprint? Should they have more energy efficient buildings? Should they have more fuel economical fleets of vehicles, et cetera? Should municipalities be in that business?
I think they can be in the business to a point where it strategically makes sense. Once again, the contribution of what they're talking about here with vehicles and everything else, CO2 is not an argument to support that, because we need more CO2, quite frankly. That's what the real scientists tell us. So I think we have to look at these things and define who is giving us the scientific information that is correct. In other words, something that is not manipulated by computer models or other methods of discussion. So,
how was your delegation received by Regional Council?
Well, I was very pleased, as was our whole group that were there, with the response. First of all, the chair and council were obviously courteous to us, and we appreciate that. And then when we closed the delegation with the idea of asking them to please look at the total value of what they're spending on these various climate-driven programs from ICLEI and from the Federation of Canadian Municipalities, to really look at that, total it up so you can get your head around it. And that's not a number that anybody has. And so one of the counselors, Councillor Foxton, was kind of curious, and so she spoke up and asked Chair Redmond if there could be an audit of how much is the region spending for all of these globalist-driven goals.
I think it's a worthwhile pursuit to find that number, and I certainly appreciate your time, Peter, to help us get closer to learning it. Thank you very much for joining the show this morning.
Well, thank you for the time, and hope you have a great day.
You too. Bye-bye.
Bye for now.
Peter McFadden is a member of ICLEI Canada, Kicking International Council out of local environmental initiatives. I can absolutely get behind the idea of having some sort of accounting locally about what is being spent on various climate initiatives and how we measure the success of those initiatives. I can absolutely get behind that. And there may well be, certain initiatives that have been granted funding that have not yet been started or something along those lines. What I struggle getting behind is any idea that the 15-minute city and the walkability inherent in the idea of a 15-minute city is somehow meant to control our movements and contain us to just that geographic area that we can walk within 15 minutes. I don't buy that for one hot second. However, if you want to have a conversation around an accounting of our various climate change initiatives locally, how much we are spending and what the return on those investments are, I'm absolutely here for that. What about you? Always like to hear your thoughts on the Mike Farwell Show. This is 570 News Radio and Rogers TV. ICLEI Canada, ICLEI, standing for Kicking International Council out of local environmental initiatives. He appeared before regional council and asked for a full costing of what we are spending on environmental initiatives and what return we're getting on those investments. I can get behind the request for that kind of financial transparency. I struggle a little bit more with the intent behind this, or the underlying belief that somehow when we move to more walkable neighborhoods, for example, this is some sort of effort to control and track our very movements. I just can't get behind that side of the argument at all. But I'm always happy to hear from you about the things we talk about on the show. 519-570-2545, star 570, and 1-800-570-5715. Doug, good morning.
Good morning. Thanks for taking my call. 15-minute cities have been active in England for a number of years. You're restricted from going to the other side of town certain times of the day or certain times of the week. You can't even drive over there.
Doug, are you sure about that?
I'm positive.
How are you positive? Because I was in London, I don't know, like 7 years ago, and I moved about freely.
It wasn't London. There's other... Are you saying that I'm lying or misinformed? I got this information directly from a source on the internet.
But that's okay. Which source? Just which source? Which source?
Right now.
Which source? I want to know this. I'm not saying you're lying by any stretch.
It's not one source. It's many sources.
Please tell me the source. Please, Doug. Please tell me the source. Just tell me the source.
I'm searching for things all the time. Do your own search on the internet and find out the towns where it's been acted.
I will. Because I've read this before, and you know what it is? It's a bunch of hogwash, is what it is. Peter, good morning.
Good morning. Well, I guess you're going to have a conversation about 15-minute cities. Just for information, I researched 15-minute cities in England while that gentleman was talking, and I saw nothing to indicate this is a fact.
Okay, which part? I'm sorry. The fact, like, there are no 15-minute cities. Sorry?
There are 15-minute cities in England.
Yes.
But everything else that he said is, and I'm going to quote you, hogwash.
Okay.
I did my research, but I've been researching this topic for years myself. We used to live in every
Yes.
Canadian town and city was a 15-minute city.
Thank you.
New
I was
York
going to make the same point.
City its entire life.
Yes.
You're not restricted.
Peter.
And if you want to have a conversation about how we make sure we don't restrict people's rights, I am all for that, much like the transparency. But to tell me that a 15-minute city means I can't go from, I live downtown, means I can't go to Fairview Park Mall, that's ludicrous.
Peter, that's very well said. And thank you for bringing up a point that I wanted to make. Our cities used to be exactly that. I will point you to, and I know it's gone now, but I think a great example is Schneider's on Cortlandt Avenue in Kitchener, where it used to be. Why do you think all of those neighborhoods grew up around the plant? Because that's where the people who worked at the plant lived. And so from Kent Avenue, and I'm not Palmer Street's over there. Anyway, you know what I'm talking about. We all walked, or the workers, so many of them who worked at Schneider's lived in those neighborhoods that grew up around a major employer. It was, in essence, a 15-minute city. But I'll tell you what, those workers, because of the wages they were earning and their ability to buy things, would have cars that drove them to New Hamburg on the weekend if they wanted to go out there for the fall fair. I promise you that. So Peter is spot on. The 15-minute city is kind of what we used to live in. And then we grew and we sprawled. And now we're talking about maybe just providing for people the option of having what they need within walking distance. It doesn't mean they're going to be contained to that walking distance. This is the Mike Farwell Show, 570 News Radio and Rogers TV. Well, I don't think we can do a show in this day and age, these political times, without talking about tariffs. My question is, are the tariffs on or are the tariffs off? They could be off today. They could be on again tomorrow. We're just not sure. But what we are sure of is that the mayor of Kitchener made a trip to Washington, had the chance to take in some meetings and have some conversations, and we will find out what fruit those conversations bore as Kitchener Mayor Berry Vrbanovic joins us after this update from the 570 News Center. This is the Mike Farwell Show, 570 News Radio and Rogers TV. Just to be clear on what I said before we went into that update in the 570 News Center, there are no tariffs today, but April the 2nd, everything's going to get wild again. And who knows, by April the 4th, things could get less wild because we just don't know which way Donald Trump is leaning or perhaps which way the wind is blowing him, which makes him change his mind as often as he has changed it. It is definitely an interesting political world. And I use that word interesting carefully because there are a lot of other words I think we could use to describe these political times. Berry Vrbanovic is, of course, the mayor of Kitchener. He joins me in studio this morning, fresh off a visit to Washington. First and foremost, nice to see you. Good morning.
Nice to see you, too. It's great to actually be in person as opposed to talking on the phone. I mean, this is awesome.
Yeah, it really is. We've talked a lot on the phone, and oftentimes you're one place or you can't be in this place. It's great to have you right here. And I want to start with Washington. And specifically, Mayor Vrbanovic, the sentiment from those that you were meeting with and speaking to, I just wonder how widespread this notion is that the U.S. has to be protectionist. Is that the sentiment that you are hearing from those that you're talking to in Washington? So
maybe let me give it a little bit of context. The group that was down there was the Great Lakes and St. Lawrence Cities Initiative mayors. So it's basically all of the provinces and the states that touch onto the Great Lakes. So U.S.-wise, we're talking Michigan, New York, Ohio, and Indiana. And I will tell you the positive thing that I heard coming out of last week was, to a T, everyone we talked to values the Canadian relationship, talks about the history between our two countries, whether going back to World War I and II, whether we talk about things, like 9/11. Just this weekend, someone reminded me of Ken Taylor in Iran and getting the Canadians out, which didn't come up. But, obviously that's another part of our shared history. And I think, to varying degrees, everyone's a little bit surprised to see this tone coming from the administration in the White House. When it comes to the trade and tariff piece, I think it's fair to say that everyone agrees that blanket tariffs are bad for both of our countries and the residents and businesses in our country. And certainly the way it's being implemented is, on again, off again. We talk about maybe things change monthly or by the week. Sometimes they feel like they're changing by the day or by the hour, and that's not good for anyone. It makes business insecure. It makes people who have to pay mortgages insecure. And I can tell you that both the senators and the Congress people we met with are all starting to hear that in their constituencies. And the good news is that we're also seeing it play out on the news. I mean, I had different channels on when I was down there, and whether we're talking, the big news outlets like CNN or the local news, everyone was talking tariffs. And so that tells me it's resonating. And I think we're seeing the results of some of that resonating in the sense that the White House is all of a sudden putting something on, but then taking it off. And then, it almost seems like a bit of a reality show game or something that's being played. I'm really not sure what to call it.
So as the mayor of a large municipality in Canada, how do you respond and react to this?
Listen, what we learned, Mike, and as you know, I've been doing this work for a lot of years. And back in 2003, 4, and 5, cities worked with their American counterparts through the Federation of Canadian Municipalities to raise awareness with our American counterparts around softwood lumber tariffs and how they were hurting both of our countries, impacting the price of housing in the United States and so on. And that was the first time where we actually saw that kind of advocacy work very well, because it was raising issues and facts with Americans who then could take that to their administration in the White House and to government. And so doing the same thing now, I think, is helpful because, number one, they're getting surprised by some of the facts. And, just for your listeners' sake, we know that tariffs are going to, it's been estimated, impact the average U.S. household at least $1,300 U.S. a year. That's about $1,900 Canadian a year. We also know that it's going to have an impact of about 1.6% on the American GDP. Now, that doesn't sound like a lot, but that's over $440 billion. And most of that will be felt, in fact, not across the U.S., but in the 4 border states that we're talking about. So everyone's starting to understand the impact on people, jobs, quality of life, the companies that are there. And the reality is, if you implement them and have the impact start kicking in, you don't solve these problems overnight. Even if you want to move manufacturing, you can't open a factory tomorrow. This takes months and not years of planning and transition. And in the long run, it's not good for either of our countries.
Are jobs or the economy at risk here in the region of Waterloo?
Absolutely. I mean, I think we wouldn't be truthful to say anything else. As you know, the Canadian Chamber of Commerce has identified this region as being the 4th most impacted in the country, 2nd most impacted in Ontario. Some of that is obviously because of our manufacturing and our links to the automotive sector. We have 2 Toyota plants, many of which have employees from within the region in terms of the plants in Cambridge and Woodstock, plus many automotive parts manufacturers that work in the area and not only supply Toyota, but also those working our way down the highway towards Windsor and also into the GTA. And so that's a real concern because, when we talk cars as an example, cars and parts can actually, somebody looked at this and at times you can have parts going back and forth across the border at different stages up to 8 times on some vehicles. And that's the whole point that we were trying to say is there's no such thing as a Canadian or an American car. It's a North American car because our manufacturing systems have become so integrated. And that's been a good thing because it's allowed both of our countries and people in our communities to thrive as a result of that, and we need to make sure that stays on track.
Kitchener Mayor Berry Vrbanovic, fresh off a visit to Washington, joins us in studio this morning. We're going to continue the conversation and also touch on the new Liberal leader here in Canada, Mark Carney. Stay with us on the Mike Farwell Show. This is 570 News Radio and Rogers TV. Kitchener Mayor Berry Vrbanovic joins us in studio this morning. He was in Washington last week with a number of other Canadian and U.S. mayors doing some advocacy, talking tariffs. What was the outcome, Mayor Vrbanovic? What did you come away with by way of action, advocacy plans moving forward?
So, really the Great Lakes St. Lawrence Cities Initiative has an advocacy day every year. It's often focused on infrastructure around water and so on associated with the Great Lakes. Trade and tariffs obviously became the leading topic this year and why the group grew in terms of the meetings. So it really was about raising awareness with senators and Congress people on both sides of the House, and that was very successful, I think. Getting a better understanding and hoping that some of them and some, obviously the Republicans, have a more direct line to the White House and carrying that message forward. I know this week, for example, the Federation of Canadian Municipalities has some folks down again who are doing some meetings in conjunction with the National League of Cities Congressional Week. And so, it's this ongoing Team Canada approach of all three orders of government, which I think is really key, because we know we can be most successful when we're giving people the tools and the information to arm them with so that they can then go and do the advocacy with their own government. And so that really was the focus. And I think on that front, it was very successful.
Are we going to be able to weather this storm locally?
Listen, I mean, you're a hockey guy, and elbows up seems to have become the popular phrase around this whole issue. And I think if we look at this area and the challenges that we've experienced over our history, whether it was the original transition out of manufacturing and how we reinvented ourselves as a region, particularly as a city in terms of Kitchener, I think about what happened with Blackberry and how the community weathered that. I think we will weather this as well. We're a resilient community. We're a community that pulls together and barn raises when the going gets tough. And you know what? I have to give credit where credit is due. Our outgoing Prime Minister, and I'm hoping our incoming Prime Minister, as well as our Premier, have been, in my view, knocking it out of the park in terms of delivering a strong, cohesive message to Americans. And if anything, and I think it was Mr. Carney who said this last night, there's something we actually have to thank Donald Trump for. He's brought Canadians, and I'll say, in our community together in ways we haven't seen in a long, long time. And it's fantastic to see that national pride. And boy, was it sweet to see us win that hockey game too, just to give it to them right at the right time.
It really was. So further to that point on Mr. Carney, if even for a minute, he is the Prime Minister designate here in Canada, what is your take on the new Liberal leader?
Listen, I'm certain he, without a doubt, had a very clear mandate coming out of the Liberal leadership, and it was good to see as many Canadians engage in that process. I think everyone knows there's going to be a federal election sometime this year. I mean, I guess in theory, if you follow constitutional practice, you could actually go 5 years into late next year. But the signals are that we're going to be in one sooner rather than later. And I think that's a good thing. I'm encouraged by some of the things that I've heard. I've had an opportunity to speak with him on a couple different occasions, and he really seems to understand the importance of cities and the role that cities play in nation building. And so, when we think about things like coming up with a new fiscal framework in the relationship between cities and communities and the federal government and provinces and territories, I'm hoping that we'll find a government there that's willing to work with us and listen. We're not going to be able to successfully deal with this tariff issue if we don't all pull together. And I go back to a number of weeks ago when we had our Big City Mayors Caucus meeting. in Ottawa. We met with Prime Minister Trudeau. We met with Foreign Affairs Minister Jolie, as well as Housing and Infrastructure Minister Nathan Erskine-Smith. And that one was important because it allowed us to bring up the recession of 2008, 9, and 10. And at that time, much of the economic stimulus program was focused on the federal government working primarily with cities and communities, because it was recognized that any investments that they made would see the biggest impact on the Canadian economy if they were actually invested in cities. And so when we think about housing and infrastructure and that being a priority in all of our communities, if that can become part of any stimulus that's necessary as we work through whatever tariffs look like, I think that's going to be really important. And obviously just one piece of going forward, because it's been encouraging to see the provinces and territories trying to knock down interprovincial barriers. That was a great signal last week and encouraging. And the other one that, quite frankly, we've taken, I believe, in hindsight is always 2020. I think we've taken the Canada-U.S. relationship a bit for granted, probably on both sides, assuming it's always going to be great. And while we have trade agreements like CETA, the Canada-European Trade Agreement, as a fallback, we never really actively pursued it, partially because of geography. And now I think we're seeing that we actually are probably going to need to do more with those places because we don't want to leave ourselves so vulnerable going forward.
Before I let you go, Mayor Vrbanovic, I want to take a bit of a tangent here, come back to something local. At Regional Council, before you were in Washington, you moved a motion to fill a seat on Regional Council vacated by the resignation of Rob Deutschmann. And that motion was to appoint the next runner-up. I'll be blunt. I don't like this. I don't like it one bit. I don't think voters should ever be denied the opportunity to have their voice heard through a vote of some kind. In this case, it would have been a by-election. Why did you decide or move this motion, which passed 14-1? Only Dorothy McCabe, regional councillor and mayor of Waterloo, was against. But why did you decide that voters shouldn't have the chance to have their voice heard?
So I guess I would say a few things to you, Mike, and I share your passion about this. I mean, I haven't missed voting in an election since I turned 18. The first election was a couple weeks after my 18th birthday, and I wish everybody made it a priority at all three orders of government. I think, number one, I would remind everyone that, in fact, people did have a vote. That vote, granted, was, I guess 2 years ago now, and Matt came a close fifth. Just, I think, was 300 and change votes behind Rob Deutschmann in that election. And so people clearly, indicated their support for him. The next person on the list was about 3,000 votes away. And when I looked at that and I looked at the other two options, one being a by-election for, that was going to cost $700,000 to $800,000, and another one that was simply going to allow people to apply, and 16 people around the horseshoe getting to vote who their favorite person was. The cost was a concern on one, and the other was very undemocratic from my perspective. And I thought this was a reasonable balance, particularly in an instance where, like with Stephanie Stretch on Kitchener Council, where she was 100 and change away from Aisling Clancy, it made sense to go that route. To be frank, if there were two people, if Colleen James was successful as well, and with the next person 3,000 behind, despite the cost in that instance, I think the only viable option, because there wasn't a clear sixth person, would have been to go to a by-election in that instance.
I'm going to keep pushing for by-elections regardless, but appreciate you.
I respect that. That's why I love this. We can have healthy debate. It's the beauty of our democracy.
Exactly, and I want to make sure it remains healthy, that democracy. Thank you very much for joining us this morning, and thanks for the work you're doing on tariffs.
Thanks for having me in. It's always great to see you.
Kitchener Mayor Berry Vrbanovic joins us on the Mike Farwell Show this morning, 570 News Radio and Rogers TV. You heard Kitchener Mayor Berry Vrbanovic in the last few minutes talk about our leaders' various responses to tariffs. The outgoing Prime Minister, the incoming Prime Minister designate, the Premier of Ontario. Doug Ford was again on U.S. television this weekend making Ontario's case We'll share some of that audio with you before 11. Also, some audio from the 91-year-old former Prime Minister Jean Chrétien at the Liberal Leadership Convention this weekend. And right after this update from the 570 News Centre, 50 years of Women of the Year. This is the Mike Farwell Show, 570 News Radio. Well, the in-studio guests just keep on coming in, and I'm here for it, especially when they are as of high a caliber as they've been so far today. After Kitchener Mayor Berry Vrbanovic leaves, the executive director of Kitchener-Waterloo Oktoberfest, Tracy Van Kalsbeek, sidles into the studio and sits across from me. Good morning.
Good morning. Interesting that you put me up there with the mayor, but
absolutely right where you belong. I might even put you a notch higher.
Don't tell him that.
No, I will. He's in my bad books right now. With these motions he's bringing to regional council and that nonsense, but he knows.
Well, I'm not in your bad books.
You are definitely not in my bad books, and neither is the annual Women of the Year event, which Tracy is going to celebrate a half century, 50 years this year.
I know, it is crazy. 50 years of celebrating women in our community. And it's just been an amazing event to be a part of.
So it makes perfect sense that we have this conversation today, having just come off a weekend during which we recognized International Women's Day. But what was the idea behind Women of the Year when it started all those decades ago?
Yeah, the same type of thing, that we're celebrating women and leadership in our community. And, KW Oktoberfest was way out in front of everybody in doing that. And like you said, we're celebrating half a century now.
It's not lost on me that you and I are having this conversation today as you are the face and the executive director of KW Oktoberfest, which, in fairness, and I say this as somebody that volunteered with the festival for a number of years, it's often being described as a quote-unquote old boys club. And here you are, a strong woman leading this festival every year. I think that speaks to the very idea of Women of the Year.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think too that, I brought a different spin and take on things for sure. And, our whole team, our whole staffing team is all women as well. And, we work really hard together. And I just, like I said earlier, I love Women of the Year. Last year, we had our most nominations ever. And we had the most people that attended the event ever. And I'm hoping that we can top it this year with the 50th because it was just so great last year.
So let's get into some of those details then. I know it comes up in May, and we do. We want to top those numbers from last year. Let's keep this thing growing. What do we need to know about this year's event?
Yeah, so our nominations are open now. We have 12 categories. There are 2 new ones this year. One is educator. So there's a whole group of women out there we know that are amazing teachers and educators. So we want to make sure that we celebrate them. And then we have a new Rising Star Award for the younger professional. And then we have all our tried and true. Last year, we added the skilled trades, which was a great addition. We have STEM, we have professional, arts and culture. There's all sorts of them there. So if people go to womenoftheyear.ca, that's where they'll be able to do the nominations.
All right. Womenoftheyear.ca. The nominations are open now, those 2 new categories that you talked about. What is the evening itself like, Tracy?
Yeah, it's hard to explain. Like last year, I just kind of stood there in awe of like all these amazing women and people that support them in the room. And just the vibe was just so cool. And, it is like we had some really great speakers last year. We had Martha Breidup and we had Trish Mumby from Mabel's Labels. Like they were just incredible and they helped to kind of set that scene. And then just, the women, the caliber of women and the ones that would get up and accept the awards and, the words that they shared. Just, I don't know. I've never felt anything quite like it.
Why is it important that KW Oktoberfest be involved in an initiative like this?
Yeah, it goes back to we're going into 57 years with the festival and a big part of the brand makeup for Waterloo region. And, why would we not celebrate women? And, it just, the history, I don't know, just the history of it all just means so much.
Womenoftheyear.ca, again, is the website that you can visit. The nominations are open now. And does somebody have to nominate somebody else? Is
yes,
that how it
and
works?
You kind of want to make sure that they know about the nomination too.
Right.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. So nominate your sisters, your mothers, your friends, your coworkers. people that identify as female too. And like I said, we want to top our numbers. Last year, I think we got up to 121 or 120 something anyways. We want to top that this year. And, let's keep them coming in, rolling in, and celebrating more and more women in our community.
May the 22nd at Binghamton's is the date, so just over 2 months away. But I know these things don't plan themselves and they don't come together overnight. Yes. How are we feeling as the date approaches?
We have a dynamo group of volunteers that lead this charge for us. And the two committee chairs, Christy and Karina, are just fantastic and have been doing this for a long time. One other thing, actually, I wanted to mention in celebration of the 50th anniversary and recognizing it, we're actually hosting a women's expo. So Women of the Year is on the 22nd, which is a Thursday night. And then Saturday, we're hosting a women's expo with amazing, I was looking at the list the other day, and I've been helping to recruit and stuff too, but amazing speakers and breakout sessions and vendors and all women all the time.
Here we are, Tracy, on March the 10th, talking about a big event celebrating its 50th anniversary on May the 22nd, followed by the Women's Expo on May the 24th. But I bring all of this up and I put the dates on it because you are the executive director of KW Oktoberfest. It ain't October.
It is not, but I feel like every day is October for me.
This is really a year-round going concern. It's a 12-month. I know the festival itself and the importance around that and the parade and the fest halls, etc. But clearly, this festival has turned into something that is a going concern 12 months of the year.
Yeah, absolutely, it has. And again, I talk about the longevity of the festival in our community, and it never stops for us. We're always planning. The day after the festival is done, we're planning for the next year, and we couldn't do it without our incredible volunteers. We have over 350 volunteers that help us host the festival each year, and our fest hall and partners, the German clubs and Binghamton's, and then a lot of third-party events. We were just talking, you and I, about Oktoberfest. That's a new one that's joining us this year, and so for folks that are that like to fish and are anglers, now we got a Oktoberfest celebrating our history of German roots here in the community too.
Absolutely. I saw the release this morning and it just made me think again, year-round, lots going on. Oktoberfest is a going concern. And, it's a signature festival in this community. We know that. We're identified by it, so closely tied to it. And Festivals Ontario recognize this with an award for your marketing and outreach.
For collaboration on our Metrolinx partnership when we hosted last year, the Later Goes in Line, bringing in folks from the GTA and along the corridor into Oktoberfest on Thanksgiving weekend. Yeah, it was really great. And they were a great partner. And Explore Waterloo Region also got involved, and we just, it was such a great collaboration to be able to do that.
Can't wait for Oktoberfest 2025 to arrive later this year, but first and foremost, it's May the 22nd at Binghamton's for Women of the Year. Nominations open now at womenoftheyear.ca. Let's get more than those 120 nominations that we had last year.
Yes,
Tracy,
please.
Thanks for everything you and the team do, and thanks for being here this morning.
Thanks for having me, Mike.
Tracy Van Kalsbeek is the executive director of KW Oktoberfest, joins us on the Mike Farwell Show, 570 News Radio and Rogers TV. I received a great email from Ron over the weekend, and Ron, I love you. First of all, Ron listens daily, which makes me love him even more. No question about that. And I love where Ron is coming from with this idea. I'll share it with you here. Ron writes to Mike at 570news.com. I have a suggestion. Step 1, welcome to No Trump Tuesdays. Thank goodness this is Monday because I'm talking about it. Anyway, welcome to No Trump Tuesdays. On Tuesdays, all references to the American president will be just that, the American president, or AP for short. Any use of Trump will be bleeped. We do this as a weekly reminder of our ongoing respect for the position as well as for our friends to the South, regardless who holds its position. Step 2, days later, announce, due to the positive response of listeners, we are making it an everyday practice. I can imagine this catching on. And if it does, I see it having more impact on the current AP than any retaliatory tariff, all without uttering a single negative word. Regards, Ron. Ron, I get where you're coming from. And I'm not entirely in disagreement that part of what we're experiencing here is the AP's, to coin Ron's phrase, desperate appeals for attention, or his desperate need for attention. If the cameras and the lights and the microphones are not around, I do not believe the AP knows what to do with himself. And so we are at really his whimsy right now. But it is almost impossible to go through a day in these political times without talking about the impact of all of it and how others are responding to it. And when Kitchener Mayor Berry Vrbanovic was with us in the last half hour talking about his trip to Washington, the advocacy that's underway with border states and their governors in attempts to figure out the lay of the land when it comes to tariffs. Mayor Vrbanovic acknowledged the good work that he sees being done by our outgoing Prime Minister, the incoming Prime Minister designate anyway in Mark Carney, and Ontario Premier Doug Ford, who, by the way, was on U.S. television again this weekend. Doug Ford did a sit-down, almost 20-minute interview with CBS News and had this to say, among other things.
Just the sheer economic power of Ontario. If we were a standalone country, we'd be the third largest trading partner in the world, Ontario alone, to the U.S. We do over 500 billion Canadian in two-way trade, split equally down the center. We buy as many cars as we ship in, and the ones that we ship down, 50% of them are U.S. parts. And we have the largest critical mineral deposit in the entire world. So let's ship that down. Then you have Quebec, and I have a whole list of Ontario, but let's move to Quebec. Aluminum. The U.S. needs aluminum to keep manufacturing going. Yeah. Well, they only produce 16%. A massive chunk, over 67%, comes from Quebec. Steel as well, here in Ontario. Lumber across the country. He wants to put a tariff. Guess what? All the houses are going up in cost because he's putting a tariff on Canadian lumber. And Quebec sends electricity down to the U.S. British Columbia sends electricity. My good friends in Manitoba, they send electricity, and they have nickel as well. And also alcohol. In Ontario, we're the largest purchaser of alcohol in the world. We buy off 35 states, 3,600 products. We're the largest customer to California wines, to Kentucky bourbon, and Texas, all over the place.
And you cut it all off.
We pulled them all off the shelves. I don't want to do this. You know, when I talked to the great governor of Kentucky, he said, Premier, please do not take my bourbon off the shelves. I said, I have no choice. Talk to your president. I want to buy more bourbon, but they're coming off the shelves. And this is affecting everyone. They're gonna have layoffs. It's unfortunate. For what?
And that is the million-dollar question. For what? I know this weekend's Liberal Leadership Convention was all about electing a new leader and thus became all about Mark Carney. But I think it was a former Liberal leader and Prime Minister that kind of stole the show. You'll hear from him next on the Mike Farwell Show. This is 570 News Radio and Rogers TV. I know this weekend was supposed to be all about the farewell of Justin Trudeau and the coronation, as many have called it, of Mark Carney. But it was the guy who's famous for the Shawinigan handshake that may have stolen the show at this weekend's Liberal Leadership Convention. And maybe, just maybe, Canadians could get behind voting for this former Prime Minister.
You know, we will work in collaboration with them. But you know, they have to understand, and everybody understand, that we are a very proud country. For me, I can tell you that sometimes I can say this. From one old guy to another old guy. Stop this nonsense. Canada will never join the United States. I can tell you that my parents were not millionaires from New York, but my mother taught us good manners. She would have been ashamed of me if I had treated anyone the way that the president treated my prime minister and the president in Ukraine in the last few weeks. The reason we don't want to become American is because our values as Canadians. We are proud Canadians, and yes, we owe a debt of recognition to Mr. Trump. He has united us as never before. So I want to say thank you to him, and I think I will propose him for the Order of Canada. I'm just kidding. Canada is the land of freedom. Canada is the land of opportunity, the land of generosity, the land of tolerance, the land of stability, the land of rule of law. It is our land that is the envy of the world. Canada will continue to rise through north strong and free. Nobody will starve us into submission because Canada is and will remain the best country in the world. Vive le Canada!
91-year-old Jean Chrétien at yesterday's Liberal Leadership Convention. Perhaps the best speech that was heard all day, and maybe, just maybe, invoking enough or inspiring enough that Canadians from coast to coast to coast are out there thinking, can we vote for this guy again? Like, what if we put him back in office? There will be a federal election sometime in our future. I predict it will be our near future, and it will mean Liberal leader and Prime Minister designate Mark Carney will run against Pierre Poilievre. I'll leave the other guy out because he's completely irrelevant in the mix, and we shall see how Canadians feel about their choices federally. I'm going to get you to the 570 News Center for an update, and then Brian Allison, our musicologist, joins us for This Week in Music History on the Mike Farwell Show, 570 News Radio and Rogers TV. Every Monday morning at 11 o'clock, musicologist Brian Allison joins us for This Week in Music History. I strongly encourage you to check out his Facebook page. Just search This Week in Music History. Join. You'll get these tidbits and so much more on a weekly basis because Brian loves to compile them. And I started the segment today with a Dixie Chicks song, I'm Not Ready to Play Nice. And isn't it, I don't know, I feel like history's repeating itself to some degree, Brian, because it was on This Week in Music History in 2003 that there was a bit of a conflict between the Chicks and the President of the United States.
A big conflict between the Chicks and country music fans and music fans worldwide. So March 10th, 2003, the Dixie Chicks, and they were the Dixie Chicks back then. They've since changed their name to just plain the Chicks, but this is when they were still known as the Dixie Chicks. They were playing a show in London, England, and this was right just about at the run-up to the American invasion of Iraq. And Natalie Maines, principal songwriter and singer for the Dixie Chicks, made a comment that she was, quote, ashamed the President of the United States is from Texas, referencing her own hometown. She was from Lubbock, Texas. So she was basically saying, you know, I'm ashamed to be from Texas and that the President of the United States is from Texas. And it was really just an offhanded remark during a concert, but it went completely viral. People were really, really upset about this, that she would have the nerve to say, you know, I'm ashamed that the President of the United States is from my home state, based on a political opinion. And it did not land well. There were many, many protests. There were boycotts of the Dixie Chicks concerts. There were death threats to Natalie Maines and the rest of the band. It was a pretty bad backlash as far as music backlashes go. So I think that it did start a conversation about should musicians openly express their political leanings? Is that going to be detrimental to, their art? Talk amongst yourselves. I'm not sure where we're at today. It seems like everybody's got a position today.
I agree wholeheartedly with that. Isn't it interesting? Okay. In the 80s, I loved this band, Brian, and I admit that there was a part of me that felt as though the band's lead singer had sold out when he went softer as a soloist later, but maybe I was just jealous because he was so handsome and had good teeth. I don't know. And I've come back around on Bon Jovi, but this week in music history back in 83 is a year that matters, a week that matters to Bon Jovi.
Yep, March 14th, 1983, Bon Jovi was formed on that actual day. They got together initially as a threesome and decided they were going to make a go at being a band, decided to take their name from lead singer, who John Bon Jovi, his name was, but they shortened it to a two-word Bon Jovi. And I think it's fair to say it worked out pretty well for Bon Jovi. They sold around 35 million albums in the U.S., and their fourth album, 1988's New Jersey, broke a record for a hard rock album by producing 5 top 10 U.S. singles. So that was a pretty big record for them. Yeah, I'm kind of the same as you, Mike. I kind of have a love-hate with Bon Jovi. When they first came out, I thought they were great. Good down-home band from New Jersey. Later on, they got a little more mainstream. But still, you can't deny the body of work. They did extremely well, are still, a viable band today. I know John, there's a documentary about him that's getting lots of views right now about, he struggled with his voice and trying to maintain the singing voice that he once had in the 80s, and it may or may not come back. But, yeah, big band, Bon Jovi, and they got their start back in 1983 and this week.
Yeah, see, and so we are similar in that regard. I've always kind of been a fan, Brian, of, dance with the girl you brung, right? So stay true to your roots, but nothing wrong, I guess, with evolving with the times and fans' musical tastes. And you can't argue that Bon Jovi has absolutely had staying power. So I guess they know more than I do.
I think the argument for Bon Jovi might have been just that they went a little too far in one direction. They were essentially a hard rock band, but they always had a ballad. Every album essentially would have a power ballad, as almost every metal album back or hard rock album back in the 80s had. But there was a point where it was kind of like every song was becoming a ballad, and I think the fan base was sort of, okay, well, this is getting a little bit too soft for me. Like, I like Bon Jovi. I also like the Carpenters, but they're not the same thing. So it got to be a little bit contentious for Bon Jovi, but I think they recovered okay.
I think they did too. Okay, you dropped a name into your notes this week, and I have to be honest, you stumped me. It was on March the 11th in 2019 when we lost Hal Blaine at the age of 90. Brian, who in HE double hockey sticks is Hal Blaine?
Believe it or not, Mike, you have heard Hal Blaine's recording more than anybody else, any other recording artist in history. I don't guarantee you.
I don't believe you.
I will guarantee you.
Okay.
Hal Blaine was a very, very well-respected recording studio drummer, and he started his career in the 50s. He played on over 35,000 recording sessions. He played on over 6,000 individual singles that were released, and 150 of those singles became top 10 hits. 40 of them went to number one. So that's how many number one recordings this guy played on, including Elvis Presley's Return to Sender, The Byrds' Mr. Tambourine Man, The Beach Boys' Good Vibrations, The Mamas and the Papas' California Dreamin', Simon and Garfunkel, Bridge Over Troubled Water. Also played on a whole bunch of hit records by the Carpenters, John Denver, America, Barbra Streisand, Frank Sinatra, Neil Diamond, many others. If you were listening to music on AM radio in the 50s, 60s, 70s, you were hearing a Hal Blaine song probably every hour.
That's absolutely incredible. So just a session drummer that picked up with so many.
He was just such a good session drummer, and he was a very versatile player. And artists liked him because he would just do sort of whatever they needed him to do. Easygoing guy, very talented musician. And, word spread, and it was kind of like, get Hal Blaine to come in. He'll do this for you. He's a good drummer. And he did. And, to be in 35,000 recording sessions, I mean, that's a lifetime of work right there. But then to play on over 6,000 individual singles and have 150 of those go top 10 and 40 of them to number one, just incredible. So the name Hal Blaine, we must remember Hal, pay tribute to him, lived to be 90 years old, had a great life and a great career.
Excellent note on This Week in Music History. And I love the reference, too, to AM radio in the 1970s. This very station, when it was 570 chime, Brian, is where I cut my teeth and fell in love with the medium of radio. And here we are all these decades later.
I'm not much different. I grew up here in Kitchener as well, and 570 was the go-to AM station. We all grew up really on AM radio. I would lay in bed at night with my transistor radio on the AM station and wait for my favorite songs to come along. That's how I cut my teeth. Yeah,
you and me both. Already makes me look forward to next week, Brian. Thanks for being here again today.
Always.
Brian Allison is our musicologist who brings us This Week in Music History. I could go back. I mean, honestly, Paul Godfrey when he was the morning man, before George Michaels was the morning man on this station, back when it played music. 680 CFTR, commercial-free Sundays. Now, of course, our 680 News radio station. Oh, the memories. And gosh, am I ever old. Check out Brian's Facebook page, okay? This Week in Music History, and then join it. And you'll get tidbits like the Hal Blaine tidbit and so much more each week. And Brian joins us Monday mornings at 11 for This Week in Music History here on the Mike Farwell Show, 570 News Radio and Rogers TV. Well, life is most certainly a carnival for the Liberal Party of Canada as they elect Mark Carney, their new leader. And it wasn't even close. The big question now is, now what? David Drewe joins us every Monday morning at 11:30 for Drew's Views, and he will tell us what comes next right after this on the Mike Farwell Show, 570 News Radio. David Drewe joins us every Monday morning, 11:30 for Drew's Views. David is the owner of Negotiating Change, Government Relations and Stakeholder Engagement Strategies, also a former Conservative Party staffer. Plenty of time spent on the Hill, as we say, in Ottawa. And I'm so curious this morning, sir, what you think of what happened yesterday. I mean, it wasn't even close. Mark Carney dusted the competition.
Dusted him. And it's not that I want to keep you in suspense, but one of my weakest areas is local government. And just it came up on the newscast about the court injunction and the students getting arrested if they have the party. And I don't know when you're next going to have somebody from the city or the police or whomever on, but my only question is why now? Like, we could have done this decades ago. Like, why now? Why did this take? That's what my only question about it. I love it. I love it absolutely. But geez, why didn't we do this like when people were getting hit with cinder blocks?
We're going to need a bigger holding cell.
Oh, that's okay. Like, seriously, we'll send them to Guelph. We can rent out space from the other areas.
Somebody already pointed out that there is no Kitchener Rangers game on Monday, March the 17th. Just send them all to the Odd.
Yeah, unfortunately, with the processing times of our courts, we might be delaying the entire rest of the season. Sorry, though, Mark Carney. I didn't mean to diverge.
That's quite all right. I know it's very interesting news coming from the city today. It is.
So, yeah, 85.9, was it?
It was. Let's round up. Come on, give him an 86.
Okay. We'll come back to the 85.9. That's a bigger number than Poilievre won by, which is just amazing for Mark Carney as it was for Pierre Poilievre in the sense that he owes nobody anything. When you win on the fourth ballot by 1%, everybody can say you owe us the victory. When you win with 85%, you can tell anybody who did anything for you to screw off because you don't need them. So he has this party absolutely under his control, which is great for him. Erin O'Toole, Andrew Scheer, they never had that on the Conservative side. So at least it's going to be a fair fight where you have two party leaders with solid support of their parties behind them going into the next election. That's going to be kind of cool because if it had been Poilievre versus Trudeau, it wouldn't have been that. And for the past few elections, it wasn't there on the Conservative side, it felt like. So, yay. But Mark Carney came in and took out the much more seasoned, experienced candidates, kind of like Poilievre took out Jean Biltoin Charest. So would that make Freeland Jean Charest?
Wow. Interesting.
Yeah. Well, no, that's just it. It's like, I'm not saying any criticism of either of them, but neither of them performed up to expectation.
Not even close in Chrystia Freeland's case.
And, a long time ago, I was saying she might be embarrassed by this, and losing is one thing, but a road is another. I don't know that she even has a right to demand a cabinet seat at this point. She definitely doesn't have the stroke to say, I want foreign affairs or finance, one of the big things that I had in the last one. She's now really demonstrated that she can be cast aside if need be, and there's no constituency behind her. So he's got a really, really free hand.
What do you make of Karina Gould's standing at the end?
Well, first of all, I was wrong about it. I thought she was going to do much better than that, so mea culpa there. But she was the one who was kind of running defending Justin Trudeau's record. And you could kind of look at her as the cipher for that. She was the one who was going to continue the carbon tax. She was the one who was going to continue on the capital gains policies, and the Liberal Party rejected that. That was the other neat thing, eh?
Yes, it was. I was thrilled to hear it.
No, but the applause the Liberal Party was giving Mark Carney at the points where he was talking about killing the carbon tax and killing the capital, they were applauding the stuff.
Justin Trudeau didn't applaud.
He did not. But that's just it. All the other people, it's like, can you imagine how Justin Trudeau must have felt at that point going, they're not my trained seals anymore. They're not my trained seals anymore. And that's just it. They were calling people names for disagreeing with them on the capital gains. They were calling people names. You climate change denier if you didn't agree with the carbon tax policy. And now they're just wildly applauding everything they hated a couple of years ago.
I have to think, David, that the outcomes for both Chrystia Freeland and Karina Gould are simply because they are carrying Trudeau's baggage. You can talk all you want about Freeland stabbing Trudeau in the back and getting this process underway, etc. And I know there are justifiable criticisms that somebody who has never held public office, never been even in an election, is now, for a hot minute at least, the Prime Minister. I think that's a justifiable criticism, but he's the one that was overwhelmingly selected because, I would submit, he's perceived as an outsider.
It's it's like, how far back do you want to go in the evolutionary chain of Mark Carney's support? Is he where he is because of what you said? Because he's an outsider? Or is he where he is because the polls automatically said that he had the best chance of beating Pierre Poilievre, and that's where the Liberals went? And then the next fair question is, well, does he have that support in the polls just because he's an outsider? It's the chicken or the egg thing. But I do not think that the Liberals went to him because he's an outsider. I think the Liberals went to him because the polls said. And that's what they do. Now, the polls might have been there because all the rest of us are sitting there going, well, he wasn't part of the stench of the last decade. And so we are more likely to vote for him because of that. But I think when you get to that right proximate cause, it's electability.
Okay, so the big question is, now what?
Yeah, so now what? First question, I guess. Do we have Doug Ford and Danielle Smith and Dave Eby slowing down on the cowboy diplomacy with the U.S. on tariffs because we now have a prime minister? Or are we going to be waiting for a prime minister who's not a lame duck with a mandate before they allow someone else to take charge? I don't know. I really don't think that they're going to stop until there's someone around to tell them to stop who can actually carry a little bit of a stick. And until there's an election, I don't know that anybody has a stick federally yet. It's kind of why we needed the election a long time ago. We need somebody in charge there with a mandate to take some risks.
Do you think we're going to see any governing happen before the next election? I suggested earlier this morning on the show, David, that if I'm the Conservatives, I may not be as interested currently in going to an election as I certainly was 6 months ago. You're no longer fighting Justin Trudeau and the Trudeau Liberals. The polls suggest that it's almost a dead heat. I don't know. And then, of course, the other argument is why give Carney any chance to gain traction? But I don't know. Are you interested in jumping into this pool right now?
Okay, beyond getting taken down, there's reasons he might not want to reconvene the House. I mean, it doesn't really look good to have a throne speech that you are not in the camera shot of because he doesn't have a seat in the House. He will not be able to be there as the Governor General reads the throne speech. If he brings back the House, he has to reappoint a new cabinet. And then it's a case of, well, how many of the Trudeau people does he keep? And how much of a fresh face does he put on? He doesn't want to have the entire Trudeau cabinet. But if he actually has to go through that cabinet shuffle, do you really want to replace your Minister of Foreign Affairs at this point? Do you really want to put somebody new in at finance? Do you really want to? Especially when they're not going to get through their training binders likely before an election is called. So
you think an election still sooner than later?
I do think an election sooner than later, but these are both very qualitative terms. Does he have the time to go on an international tour through Europe to show how he can build relationships that are anti-Trumpish, get some film footage to use for the commercials? What does he do? There's a lot of reasons why he might want to stay, but how long can he stay without calling back the House? And as soon as he calls back the House, I'm not so worried about that anymore because Jagmeet Singh is now saying he will support the government again.
Stop with Jagmeet Singh.
Well, no, but that's just it. I believe him when he says he's going to support the government. I never believe him when he says he's going to take it down. To me, that's the empty threat. It's not.
If Singh is supporting the government, then that means the minority liberal or the supply and, well, he ripped up the supply and confidence agreement. Yeah. But anyway, the government survives.
Yeah. But all the same, then you still have to name that cabinet. Then you also have to drop your budget, which involves choices. And right now, we don't know where Mark Carney stands on anything. And nothing defines you than the choices you have to make in a budget. And he can't do what Justin Trudeau did year after year after year and spend irresponsibly and buy votes. Because he's Mark Carney, he's a banker. And if all of a sudden he starts pursuing these crazy debt policies under a different name, it's his core constituency of economists who are going to be saying, and he knows this is stupid. So does he want to get the election out of the way while he's still on this sugar high? I kind of think yes. But then the question is, how can you put a Mark Carney brand on a Mark Carney, let's say, non-government? How much can you do without calling back the House? Hey, it's very fair to go on a listening tour to understand how the tariffs are affecting Joe and John Canadian. It's very fair to do this, that, the other thing. How long can you get away with it? I don't know.
David Drewe joins us every Monday morning, 11:30 for Drew's Views. We'll continue our conversation on the Mike Farwell Show, 570 News Radio and Rogers TV. David Drewe is the owner of Negotiating Change, Government Relations, Stakeholder Engagement Strategies. He joins us every Monday morning, 11:30 here on the show for Drew's Views. It's been famously said, David, by minds far brighter than mine, that the only poll that matters is on Election Day. But polls currently are rather intriguing, aren't they?
Well, there's a few interesting things about it. First, I got to eat my hat a little bit because I said if the Liberals were going to get a bump out of the Trudeau resignation and Trump, it would have happened already a few weeks ago. And as soon as I said that, they started really climbing consistently. It's still nowhere near a Liberal victory, but it's an election. And a month ago, it was not an election. It was going to be a beating. So let's talk that about the polls. Other interesting thing about the polls right now is there's so much variance in where they have the parties. And it seems to be a bit of a dog's breakfast as to where the parties are. And you can expect as we get closer to a real decision that the polls will come together, because the further away you are from the decision, the more the little phrasings and variances of questions and methodologies matter. But also, they're just of no value right now. We do not have anything from Mark Carney. I guess we were talking about this before a little bit in the sense of until you put a budget down, you haven't made any choices. You haven't said no to anything. Right now, he can still be all things to all people. But once people realize that their pet project is not his pet project, or he might agree with you, but it's not in the platform for reason X, Y, or Z, some of the support will drop. And it also could go up, to be fair. Like, I am talking about how it could drop for all these reasons. But on the other hand, it is just as likely, well, not just as likely, but it is very possible that Mark Carney can thread this needle in a way that I don't see coming, that he can put the right priorities on the table in such a way that his support could go up. But right now, we just know so little about him that I don't think the polls right now matter. I think he is very popular, but it's more voting for that picture in our heads of Mark Carney because we know so little about him other than, yeah, he's that banker who got a couple countries through crises. He must be pretty darn good and pretty darn smart. And that other guy's smarmy. And by the way, you know what hadn't come up in this conversation? Jagmeet Singh.
I was just about to bring him up, but reluctantly, because I was rather dismissive of him when you mentioned even his name a few minutes ago. But come on, David. Like, if the NDP goes into another election with Jagmeet Singh, it's got to be their last, doesn't it?
And yes, but, you know, there was a point where I would have been telling you they should replace him. But now I think they should keep him for the next election because it just really looks like they are going to get squeezed out by the issue of Trump. And no offense to the NDP and their supporters, but if the issue comes down to who's best for Donald Trump, like it did with Doug Ford, the NDP aren't on the ballot. It's really a case of the people who've been in government. You can visualize being in government and doing it. And even Mark Carney will have an advantage at that point, too, because he will be the sitting prime minister at that point. You don't have to picture him and imagine him doing the job. He will be doing it at the time you're doing that imagining. So it can be visualized. But Jagmeet Singh will be left out of the conversation. The NDP, though, are going to be left out of the conversation. And I don't think it's worth putting a new leader on the altar for this one. Let him go out. Because, yeah, honestly, even Mark Carney's win does not signify good for Jagmeet Singh in a way. He won, as you say, in large part because he was an outsider, and Canadians really, really want to move on past Trudeau. And Jagmeet Singh's kind of that last reminder of that failed relationship. He's in a bad way. The whole Karina Gould numbers. My gosh, even the Liberals don't want to celebrate this legacy. So why would the NDP?
All right. For Pierre Poilievre, you mentioned earlier now that we have two leaders who have been elected to their party leadership with overwhelming numbers. So now we have an actual race for an election.
Exactly. And it's not just that it's a race. It's that in a lot of ways, it's nowhere near the race that Pierre Poilievre was planning for. He doesn't have the carbon tax to argue against. He doesn't have Justin Trudeau as the face of the campaign. Instead, he's got this person that you can't really accuse of being melodramatic or phony or just not ready. You've got this person instead who, and how do you run against him? He's put nothing on the table to disagree with. And oh yeah, by the way, for everybody who's upset about not knowing what Pierre Poilievre is going to do as prime minister, what's Mark Carney going to do next week as prime minister? No, like I just, oh my God. And that, can you imagine if a conservative had made reference to Justin Trudeau getting on his knees in front of Donald Trump? Can you imagine the cries of sexism that would be coming out right now? Mark Carney makes that joke about Poilievre, and nobody's going to see the problem. And they're going to be rightly offended if anyone does see.
He didn't make a joke, though. He just used very inflammatory language.
He said that Pierre Poilievre would get on his knees for Donald Trump.
No, he said he would worship at the altar of.
He would get on his knees to worship.
Yes. Okay, but again, it wasn't meant as a joke, I don't think. It was just him. He was really poking the bear.
Oh, I think it was poking the bear in terms of a sexist jibe. Huh. I think the getting on the knees was the real insult.
Really?
Oh, yeah.
No.
Oh, yeah. And I think if it was...
it's worship. We genuflect in church all the time.
And I also
Settle
think
down.
if the results were different,
David.
the Liberals would be the loudest ones complaining about it.
Okay. I want more time for this, but we have so little time. You got like 30 seconds hard to tell us why you owe Justin Trudeau an apology.
I really did not trust him to be doing as well as he did for his last 3 months in office. We left him managing this tariffs thing. He announced his resignation, had the long goodbye, and I am just amazed at how well he has done managing this. I did not anticipate it. I talked down of him. So, my bad. I am sorry, Justin.
I will no longer worship on my knees at the altar of David Drewe and Drewe's views.
Now, that's a bad visual.
This is the Mike Farwell Show, 570 News Radio and Rogers TV. You know what time it is. That's right. It's noon hour. And that means open lines so we can hear from you on the Talkback Hour. With it being a Monday, it's Rant or Rave coming up on the Mike Farwell Show, 570 News Radio and Rogers TV. It is your Rant or Rave edition of the 12 o'clock Talkback Hour. Rant because something has you upset. Rave because you're feeling good on this sunny and mild late winter day. It's not spring for another 10 days, but here we are enjoying some spring-like weather. You've got the numbers. Let's have a conversation. And I think the number of the day is 86. I mean 85.9, but what's 0.1% among friends? Mark Carney wins the Liberal leadership in a landslide. I mean, it wasn't even close. Is Mark Carney the savior that the Liberal Party needed? Could the Liberals be elected to a fourth consecutive term thanks to the Carney bump? When do you think we're going to the polls? Anyway, let's go to the phones and begin the conversation this afternoon with Jersey Bill. Good afternoon, Billy.
Well, I certainly have my ideas about this, and actually I found it fascinating that that old conservative David Drewe actually apologized to Justin Trudeau. I never thought I'd hear that.
You and me both.
And that sort of gives me the idea that perhaps the way they could work this is, of course, this tariff thing is front and center, and Mr. Trudeau has handled that problem fairly decently. So why not keep him in place for a couple of months? Either him or somebody install somebody as the leader in the House, maybe Mr. LeBlanc, who's also very solid in that way, and then have Singh evidently support the government, say into June. At that point the Parliament will go into their summer recess. The election called somewhere late July, middle of August, so you have an August-September election period, which will be a lot more pleasant than the recent provincial election we just went through. And that would give Carney enough time to get on his feet, not be directly responsible for the government. But if this is possible, I don't even know if it's legally possible, but if they could do it that way, I think that probably would be the best way. They don't have to go all the way to October, call the election somewhere between, say, July 31st and August 15th.
All right, Billy, appreciate the call and the thoughts on this. Just to remind you, the language that Mark Carney used when describing Pierre Poilievre in his victory speech last night.
Pierre Poilievre's plan will leave us divided and ready to be conquered. Because a person who worships at the altar of Donald Trump will kneel before him, not stand up to him. Pierre Poilievre's slogans are not solutions. His anger is in action. His division is in strength. Division won't win a trade war. Division won't pay the rent or the mortgage. Division won't bring down the price of groceries. Division won't make Canada strong.
If you worship at the altar of Donald Trump, you will kneel before him, not stand up to him. Kyle, good afternoon.
Interesting times we live in, eh?
Aren't they, though? May you live in interesting times. Is it a blessing or a curse?
Well, I want to talk about the NDP.
Why?
Thing here, because I think they're going to lose official federal party status after this.
Interesting.
You don't think so? You don't think because the way the way that they're dropping so significantly in the polls, I don't think they're going to be able to recover from this unless they get rid of Jagmeet Singh now, to be honest. If he's going to just keep propping up to the Liberals, no matter who's in power, whether it's Trudeau or Carney or whoever's next, and if he's still around, I think that they're going to be gone. Like they're hurting their numbers just by helping out and not calling an election when we need to be called. This whole back and forth thing is really hurting them. So that's just my opinion. But if you want to comment on it, I'd love that there, Mike. Thanks a lot, my friend.
All right, Kyle. Appreciate the call. I tend to lean David Drew's way on this with what he said a moment ago. If you're going to lose and lose royally anyway, why change the leader now? Let Jagmeet Singh take you into the next election and then clean up the debris afterwards. But it's an interesting thought that the NDP goes so low it loses party status. Jagmeet Singh has just been, unfortunately, in my opinion anyway, a very ineffective leader for the federal NDP. And I don't know where the party goes from here, other than in a different direction with a new leader when it gets around to its own convention. Dallas, you're on the Talkback Hour. Good afternoon.
Yes, sir. How are you today?
I'm well, thank you, sir. And you?
I'm not too bad at all.
Good.
As far as the last comments on Mr. Singh, well, he got his pension out of it. That's all he's worried about, I guess.
That's what a lot of people said, and it's hard to think otherwise right now.
As far as Mr. Trump goes, he needs a swift kick in the BA double hockey stick S.
Wow.
And, well, as far as the leadership of the Liberal Party, it was a number of people that voted for this man. And, yeah, we know nothing about Mark Carney, theoretically, other than that he ran a couple of banks and such. But, at the end of the day, for his comments against Mr. Poilievre, of who I still have kind of mixed reviews, but at the end of the day, I don't know if his comments was really warranted, because we don't necessarily know entirely what Mr. Poilievre will do either. So, having said all that, I'll leave it at that.
All right, Dallas, appreciate the call. And yeah, I'm not sure that we're raising the bar in any way with the language that Mark Carney chose in that victory speech last night. And I'll go back to this when it comes to Mark Carney and the overwhelming support he got to win this Liberal leadership. Was there any kind of foreign interference in this campaign? There were a lot of allusions to it early on. Were there bots that were casting some of the ballots? We don't know. And do we end up with a situation whereby Canada now has a prime minister who was not elected by the people? He's never held public office in his life. He's never even won an election of any kind. I think that's fair criticism here. But it's exactly what the other side of the political spectrum wanted, right? They kept calling on Justin Trudeau to resign. Well, he did, and now you've got this, and now what are you going to do about it? And I would say, again, I might be a little bit hesitant to trigger an election too soon if I was the federal Conservative Party, because the Liberals are really enjoying a moment. Maybe you at least want that moment to subside a wee bit before we get into a campaign, but that's just from where I'm sitting. Love to know what it looks like from where you're sitting. Give us a call here on the Talkback Hour. It's Rant or Rave on the Mike Farwell Show, 570 News Radio and Rogers TV. And it's only a Talkback Hour if you're talking back. So let's get right to the phones here. More from you. Paul, good afternoon.
Hey, Mike. How you doing?
Good, thanks. How are you?
Not bad. Okay, so first of all, Mike, on Friday, I think that Secondhand Lions was Michael Caine and Robert Duvall. Great movie, if you can watch it. Regarding the election here for Mr. Carney and that, I think it's pretty overwhelming there for how he won by. I don't know if I would want to call an election, but I don't know. Don't the Liberals have to pass a budget first when they reconvene in Parliament?
Well, if they reconvene, I suppose. I'm not going to claim to understand fully all the logistics, and I'm sorry that I don't.
Well, if they do, then that budget has to be accepted by the other political parties.
Right, which would be the non-confidence vote that triggers an election.
So if I was Jack Vinci, and I don't think I'd want to call an election right now. I don't know if I was the Liberals would want an election right now. But then again, I think I would. I really think I would. I think right now you do strike when the iron's hot. What I don't know. What's your take?
Yeah, well, listen, if I'm on the Liberal side of things, sure, I'm interested in striking while the iron's hot. But maybe they just want to govern for a little bit with Mark Carney kind of in the wings. I don't know. I'm sorry again that I don't know parliamentary protocol well enough to have all of that figured out. I think the system's kind of complicated. But anyway, you could, for a time, govern under Mark Carney's leadership, have a cabinet, present a budget, etc., and then have something to run an election on instead of just Mark Carney versus Pierre Poilievre. Jack, good afternoon.
Hey, Mike, first-time caller. How are you?
Hey, I'm doing all right, thanks, and thanks very much for being a first-time caller. We love it.
Yeah! Big Ranger fan as well. Go Rangers, go.
Go Rangers, go.
My thoughts a couple callers ago about not what you've just been talking about, not calling an election right away. If I were the Conservatives and have a chance, I'm the opposite. I would say yes. I think the kitchen table issues that everybody is feeling every day are going to come to the forefront, and everybody's going to soon forget about President Trump and get back to what's really hurting Canadians. And I think as far as the honeymoon goes, I think we're well into this tariff thing. We all know that Donald Trump is the master negotiator, and we need a fresh government to deal with Donald Trump, not a washed-up Mark Carney or a government that has not been elected by the people, Mike. What are your thoughts?
No, you know what, Jack? I appreciate that, and you're not wrong. As I said, I think it's fair criticism that what we have for even a fleeting moment is a prime minister designate right now, I suppose, in Mark Carney, that has not been elected by the people. I think that's fair criticism. But I would also turn it around and say what I said a moment ago. This is exactly what the opposition was calling for. They were calling for Justin Trudeau's resignation. They got it. And now this is the process that has to play out. Sure, maybe the Liberals, rigged the game so that they had this buffer while being prorogued so that they could get the leadership convention out of the way, et cetera, et cetera. And the only other thing I would say, Jack, is to your point about forgetting about Donald Trump. I think we'd all like to. I don't think he'll let us forget about him. But I'm with you on the kitchen table issues and the things that we would love to see dealt with and hear during a campaign what our leaders would do for us in that regard, us here in Canada, along with, of course, defending us and our country's interests against Donald Trump. Fair points all around. Terry, good afternoon.
Hey, good afternoon, Mike. That Dallas caller, I'm thinking of changing my name to Fort Worth. But anyway, it's not the crowd size that matters. It's how you use your crowd size that counts.
That's even more provocative than worshiping on your knees at the altar, Terry.
Yes. Anyway, Liberal Bob on Friday mentioned about that commercial that he came upon with Pierre Poilievre mentioning Donald Trump's words, word for word.
Yeah.
I came upon that ad, and yes, I think that Pierre Poilievre would make a brilliant mini-me to Donald Trump. I think he would complete Donald Trump. Thank you, Mike.
Thank you.
That's all I had to say today. I had to let that out.
All right, Terry. Thank you for letting it out. You're on fire today with multiple references in one phone call. And I'll say again, objectively, consider me politically neutral on this. As an observer, that ad that the Liberal Party has created that shows Pierre Poilievre essentially parroting things that Donald Trump says is really effective, because if this next election then becomes about Donald Trump, well, it becomes about Pierre Poilievre too. And that's exactly what the Liberals want, I think. We'll take a break and come back with more. It's Rant or Rave on your Talkback Hour today, the Mike Farwell Show, 570 News Radio and Rogers TV. Right back to the phones we go on a busy Rant or Rave Talkback Hour. Mayor Jake, good afternoon.
Mike, how are you now?
I'm good, and you?
Not so bad. It was really cute to see Mayor Berry there with the workers taking a nice little photo. Not even helping, no hard hat, no reflector, no nothing. If I was elected, you'd see me out there working with the workers, getting the roads done. They're getting bad. Driving down Victoria Street right in front of the Natural Fishing Store. They got a big pothole that hasn't even been looked at yet. Shirley Ave has like, for some reason they got the road closed, like the left lane's blocked off, and they haven't touched it. It's been like that for a month. Like, what are we waiting for? Like let's get it done. Like, let's get the roads finished up. Let's get it done before it gets too out of control. The problem is the problem is going to get worse, and people are going to hit them, and then they're going to wreck their tires, and then they're going to go to the city, and then the city's going to have to pay for it. Let's nip it in the butt now, so we don't have to pay for it later.
Mayor Jake, I appreciate the sentiment. I hope we can. I've thought of that same thing because I have hit, like, Ira Needles is a disaster. And I think to myself, if worst comes to worst and I end up damaging my vehicle, am I really going to pursue the region for compensation on it? Or am I just going to suck it up and get something fixed? Like, I wonder how often that happens. Anyway, Mayor Jake, I'm with you. I would vote for a pothole-free community. I would. Kevin, good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Mike. I'm going to make three very quick notes. First of all, I would like to say kudos to the court system to allowing our police officers for the St. Patrick's Day to charge, arrest, and punish the hooligans who are taking our city as a hostage every year. So thank you so much. It's a kind of breath of fresh air for me. The second thing, with regarding your tariffs, I understand, that Trump's tariffs against Canada and everything, but, they have to be fair. I mean, Canada has not allowed American companies to, American banks to come to Canada, American, like a telecom system to come to Canada to give us a relief to the public. We have the monopoly in a phone system, internet system by only 3 companies. And Canada doesn't allow them to come here, but U.S. allows Tim Hortons and TD Bank and all the other companies to have branches in the U.S., but we're not going to have a Dunkin' Donuts here. So anyway, that's one thing.
Okay, Kevin, I'm sorry. I gotta get to news on time because I'm so sorry because you said 3 quick points and I got to get to news on time because I got to go. I got to go today. I got to go talk sports with Let's Talk Sports Waterloo Region. Paul Fixter and I get to talk about the road to the OHL playoffs with the Kitchener Rangers, and I'm pretty excited. That means Colin Robertson, a.k.a. Wobbles, is coming in to fill the final 30 minutes with you. So hang on the line, Bob and Mark and Rick, and there's a line open for you. If you want to be a part of the Talkback Hour, Colin promises to be at his entertaining best. And Kevin, thanks for bringing up the point about the injunction that will allow students to be arrested, detained, and taken into custody if they party on the streets of Waterloo this St. Paddy's Day weekend. I kind of dig it myself. This is the Mike Farwell Show, 570 News Radio and Rogers TV.
And welcome back to the Mike Farwell Show. I'm guest host Colin Robertson for this last half an hour. Let's hit the phones hard. Mark, you're on the Mike Farwell Show. How are you doing today?
Oh, where's Mike?
Mike had to run. He has a few appointments to get to for the Kitchener Rangers, who are very important to all of us. So it's me.
And actually, that's why I'm calling, Colin.
Oh, wow.
Okay, they're having a great season.
Unbelievable season.
Fantastic season. With only, I think they've got 96 points, if I'm not mistaken, already.
Oh, it's got to be, if not, it's got to be close to that now after yesterday's win.
And I was going to ask Mike, maybe you know, Colin, in their history, the team, do you know their best season record ever?
Oh, I do not know off the top of my head, no. But it's got to be, I think don't they have the record for the most winningest season? I think.
No.
No, they don't?
No. They've done better. I think it might have been back in the Bellows days.
Ooh, that's a good question. This is what Mike should be here for, is this question. Because I don't know off the top of my head, unfortunately.
Could you possibly Google that and say over the radio?
I can take a look. I can go look for it, and I can let you know. But off the top of my head, I'm not sure. But I mean, overall, the Kitchener Rangers season has been one of the most unbelievable things to watch, especially from what it looked like at the beginning of the season, all the projections and stuff, and trading Rakoff. I mean, it's just one of the most uplifting Ranger seasons I can think of.
Absolutely. But, yeah, maybe if you could find out and just say over the radio, Colin, what year and how many wins?
2007-2008 team finished with a regular season record of 53-11. Franchise best wins and points to this day.
53-11.
53-11.
What year was that?
That was the 2007-2008 season.
Okay. How far did they go that year? Do you know?
I could probably find out more, but I'm going to leave it at that for now. But anything else on the Rangers? It's looking like Flint right now, round one, correct?
Yes.
Okay. Do you think that they easily beat Flint, or do you think it's kind of a trap?
Well, I'm a Ranger fan. Okay. And
there's no certainty in sports. Remember that. I'm
thinking this is possibly going to be their year.
Whoa. Mark, that is quite the call that you're going to make.
Honest. Well, there's only two other teams that I'm worried about. That's London and Windsor.
Those are two very strong teams to be worried about.
So I'm thinking Kitchener can really do this.
Okay, Mark, thank you very much for your phone call.
You're welcome, Colin.
Have a good day. Yeah, what an incredible season. I mean, I know Mike and Fixer were talking about it on the weekend, just kind of this incredible season that no one really had projected. And I know Fixer was talking about, he had the under on the wins from last season, but they're just blowing expectations out of the water. It's kind of hard looking at this team and going, I don't think they can win right now because, I mean, with the addition of Pridham, and they just look like they're firing on all cylinders. And it's very entertaining to watch. Let's go to our next call, though. Tom, you're on the Farwell Show. How are you doing today, Tom?
Good. No one's talking about John Chrétien.
Nobody. Mike was talking about him this morning.
Oh,
what a speech!
I'm sorry, but I didn't hear this. I thought John Chrétien did a great job. That was fantastic. Some of those stories, and man, that guy has a lot of energy for 91. I'll tell you. But he was also great. Anybody can disagree, but I thought also he was one of our better prime ministers at any given time, especially with the Shawinigan headlock.
The handshake, yes, no, one of the most iconic political moments in Canadian history. I think that they should make a Canadian heritage moment out of it. I'm not sure if they have, but it's definitely one of those things.
Absolutely. Thanks a lot. Bye.
Yeah, no problem, Tom. Have a good day. But yeah, Chrétien, it's hard not to watch that speech and kind of go, that is incredibly, it's just such an incredible speech to bring Canada together. It was just one of those things where he really did steal the show. Everyone who was watching that, all the different social media stuff that was going on was just all about Chrétien. Everyone forgot about Trudeau. Everyone kind of was like, okay, well, here's Carney, but Chrétien definitely, he stole that show and he ran away with it. Grant, how you doing today?
Yeah, we're good. I'll touch on 3 or 4 things. And it's about time they did something about this St. Patrick's Day celebration. I don't know why they took so long to have this injunction. Common sense says the local officials should have stopped it right off the bat. Instead, they allowed it. They didn't want to do anything about it. Then your last caller, or 2 callers before, he said he's afraid of London. Is that correct?
That's what he said. He said afraid of London and Windsor.
I think if Kitchener plays London properly, they can take on London. I think it'll go 7 rounds, and I solely feel it's USAID. If we had, I don't like Mike McKenzie. I don't like Troy Smith when he was there. I solely feel that with USAID being there, I think he's teaching them a lot more than these other individuals. I would never, if I'm a scout, I would never hire Mike McKenzie. If he wants to coach coach pickup hockey in your neighborhood, but I would never. And the only time that when Mike McKenzie was coaching, that the team did reasonably well, I believe it was the players telling each other, "No, this is how we have to play."
Okay, thank you, Grant. Is that the end of it, or did you have one more thing? I can't remember.
No, I think that's it.
Okay.
Yeah.
But yeah, Yusei's done an incredible job coaching. He's done an exceptional job with this team. I mean, head and shoulders above what everyone thought they were going to be this year, and it was just it's been a great season. Been a great, inspiring season to watch. We're going to go take a quick break, get you some traffic and weather together on the ones. And I'm Colin Robertson. This is the Mike Farwell Show. We'll be back with more on 570 News Radio and Rogers TV. And welcome back to the Mike Farwell Show. I'm Colin Robertson, sitting in for him just for this last half an hour of the Talkback. Let's go back to the phones because they are actually full for me. Thank you very much. Toll-free Jay, how's it going?
I got a question for you.
Go on.
It has to do with what Mr. Carney said about the politics. And I was thinking, if you're disabled and you go to church, how do you can't get out of the wheelchair, how do you, because usually you genuflect when you go to church, right?
Okay.
But if you're in a wheelchair, how do you do that? And you can't get out of the chair.
That's a good question. How do you do that?
And do you do just a sign of the cross, or what do you do?
I think that's acceptable.
Okay, well, I was coming to you for guidance. So.
Well, my guidance is I believe that's acceptable.
Thank you.
No problem. Is that it, Jay?
Well, because I have to go to a Catholic funeral. I wasn't sure what to do about that, right?
I believe you will be absolved.
Thank you, sir.
No problem, Jay. Have a good day.
Yeah, bye.
Bye. All right. Ranger Joe, how's it going with you today?
How are you, Colin?
I'm good. How are you?
Good, buddy. Good. You know what? That other caller there that phoned in about, and he was criticizing Mike McKenzie and Troy Smith and all that. I'm old school. I was brought up where my dad taught us, if you don't have anything nice to say about a person, don't say anything at all. I've been a Ranger fan forever. We used to have Rangers living with us for close to 10 years, so they're a great organization. And from year to year, you're going to get different players, and the chemistry is not always exactly the same, okay? And you got to have great goaltending. So to criticize any of those other previous guys, is ridiculous. And this year, for example, I think the Rangers got a shot at it, but everything's going to have to come together. The offense is going to have to match the great goaltending they've been getting. And just in general, a general comment is it's going to be pretty damn tough to beat the London Knights 4 games out of 7. But if any team has a chance of doing it, if the whole team plays the way I know they're capable of, it'll be the Kitchener Rangers that'll topple them this year. So good luck to the Rangers. I love those guys. Great organization, and that's all I have to say, Colin.
Well, thank you very much, Joe. Very well put with the, if you don't have anything nice to say, don't say it at all. It's kind of funny how sports seems to be the only acceptable arena where that is true.
Yeah.
Like, it just, anyone can say anything and just be as mean as possible about it, whether it be on social media or on, the radio. So, exactly. but Ranger Joe, thank you very much for your phone call. It was good talking to you. But it's one of those things where, I can see the Rangers beating London. They have been so closely matched in every single game this season. It's just one of those things where it's like, it could very well happen. If they meet in a playoff series, I think they can win 4. And I also think, London could win 4 too, but it's going to be a coin flip. It's going to be a monster of a series if they end up meeting each other. Donna, you're on the Mike Farwell Show. How are you today?
I'm doing great, Colin. How you doing?
I'm good.
Hey, with the Rangers, I too am a fan, and have been a fan for as long as I've been alive. I'm actually older than the Rangers. So I'm a frequent listener to Mike when he's announcing the Rangers on the radio, and especially enjoy his after-game show. What Mike said yesterday, we're at 44 wins this year. So we're already at 44, and that's pretty good. And you're right, in the 2007-2008 season, we hit our most wins of 53. And that year we went all the way to the Memorial Cup. hey, the way they're playing, they might do it again this year. And if I'm not mistaken, we only got 5 games left, 2 at home and 3 away. And as they say at the games, let's go Rangers.
Thank you very much, John, for your phone call. Yes, let's go Rangers. I think everyone's catching the fever, Rangers fever right now. It's just, we're getting near the end of the season. We're getting down to the last few games, and everything is going right. And that's what the kind of momentum you want to carry into the playoffs. I mean, you know, whatever team they meet in that first round, it's going to be just a great show to watch. And hopefully Kitchener can really bring it and just plow through every single round and get, you know, that elusive championship. We're going to take a quick break. When we come back, you know, more talks. You know, we'll talk more with you. Star 570. You can call us here. I'm Colin Robertson for Mike Farwell. You're listening on 570 News Radio and Rogers TV. Last chance here on the Talkback on 570 News Radio. I'm the Mike for the Mike Farwell Show. I'm Colin Robertson. Strangely enough, well, not strangely, of course Mike's going to listen to his own show, especially if some amateur like me is taking over for it. And he texted me because that question earlier about the Rangers. So sent me a nice text message here, and I'm going to read it for the Rangers stats that you're looking for. The 2007, 2008, and the 83-84 teams both had more than 50 wins. Both of those teams hosted the Memorial Cup and lost, but won the OHL championship. If this year's team wins all its remaining 5 games, 3 at home, 2 on the road, they will tie for third all-time for wins in a season with 48. As of today, with 44 wins, the team is tied for 7th all-time for wins in a season. So there you go. There's all the information and background that you need to know that I don't know off the top of my head. And thank you very much for that, Mike, because that's very helpful. So last chance here on the Talkback. You can call about anything, Rant or Rave edition. You can talk a little bit about, you know, Carney being the man now. That's his title, I'm pretty sure. Or if you want to talk about Ford, you know, putting those 25% tariffs on energy, that's going to be quite a sticking point for Americans. I would not be surprised if Trump said something about that because, I mean, it affects New York. Is it New York, Minnesota, and what's the other one? You know what? I'm going to find that out in a second. Let's go to the phones. Afif, how are you doing today?
Hey, good morning, Colin. How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
Good. I'm in the, like, everyone's going to hate me because right now I'm in New York.
Oh, no one hates you because you're in New York?
Yeah, because I'm here to meet my brother. So
okay, that's an acceptable reason.
Yeah, he had a daughter, so he's like come and meet him. I was like fine, but now I was like, oh my God, I have to go all the way to U.S., which, I mean, you know, with Trump and everything, it's kind of weird.
Does it feel weird being there right now?
Oh, it absolutely does. It's so much better to be home than here.
I would agree with that anywhere.
Right now, whenever I go with my brother, and they're like, "Oh yeah, he came from Canada," everyone's just looking at me all like with like side eyes, like, "Why are you here?"
Are you noticing like any shift? Have you been talking to people there, or have overheard anything about what's going on? Is there any kind of murmurs, or does it just seem like a normal day?
My brother said that whenever he's the doctor, so he's like, whenever I go to the hospital, every single person is talking about how Trump is trying to take over thing, and they want him to.
Oh wow, okay.
Yeah, so they're like, oh come on, why? He's like, dude, don't worry, I'm also Canadian. I'm just here because I got my job here, but I'd rather be in Canada right now, not here with these guys. So I was like, yeah, of course.
Wow. All right. Afif, thank you very much for your phone call. Get home soon, okay?
Have a good day.
You too. Yeah, definitely seems elbows up. Seems to be the right approach to this. But yeah, the Ford placed that 25% surcharge on energy to the U.S. It affects homes and businesses in Michigan, Minnesota, and New York. So, you know, we are in such a strange time, but we need to stick together in this moment. We cannot be divided by anyone or anything. We need to make sure we have a clear message. We stand together, and it's a trade war, and it's a full-on trade war. We're going to fight this thing out, but we cannot bend. I'm really happy with the approach that Ford has taken so far. It's going to be interesting to see what kind of messaging Carney has, because you know he's from outside the political spectrum, and yesterday's it was a speech. It was a good speech, nothing crazy, but it was good. And it's a good start. But elbows up, people. And this is the Mike Farwell Show. We're coming down the last few seconds here. Now You Know with Rob Snow is coming up next. For Mike Farwell, I'm Colin Robertson. Thank you for listening on 570 News Radio and Rogers TV.